and welcome to another episode of the City Journal podcast. My name is Rafael Mangual. I will be your host for the day, and I am joined by my brilliant and well-fit Manhattan Institute colleagues, Tal Fortgang and Daniel D. Martino. Welcome to the show, boys.
Thanks for having us.
First time in person for me.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice to, not see you guys in two dimensions and be in the same room. So weekend had some pretty interesting news. We had the No Kings protest, the what people are calling the largest protest in modern history, which interesting, I guess. But it got me thinking just about, protest culture and, what the kind of grievances were. And I'm just looking at, photos and coverage and, the signs and some of the interviews. And it's like, it seems like the main issues that people were upset about were the war in Gaza, the ICE immigration raids, the lawfare allegations. I'm thinking here of the cases against James Comey and Letitia James and John Bolton. Of course, these people were not very concerned with the lawfare against Donald Trump and his allies. It seemed like trans activism was one of the big kind of issues, and the use of the National Guard being deployed to cities to keep order. And it just got me thinking, because one of the things that a lot of people have been talking about with this protest is that you didn't see a ton of young people there. It seemed like the median age was like AARP membership eligible. And it just made me, sort of think back about, when I was in, that peak protest age range. I was never a protest guy. I am sad to say that I've never been to a single protest, but a lot of people in my circles back when I was in college were very into that. And I just wanted to start by asking you guys, I mean, how would you have reacted to some of these things, say, 10, 15 years ago when you were young bucks?
Well, the underlying political scandals here, such as they are, I mean, scandal might be too strong a word, just events, things going on in the world, an election that doesn't go your way. Uh, I never thought of that as a particularly great injustice. That seemed, everything seemed to be like within the realm of normal politics. I think when I was in college and a lot of my friends were out protesting a lot. Maybe you had a similar experience. I would think, am I living through a civil rights revolution now? Am I not joining in with the Martin Luther King Juniors of my era? No, there's no great injustice. They're just, there are things I'm not so happy about. And when it comes to regular politics, you move the ball through arguments and persuasion, and protest has always seemed like a kind of a shortcut in the best of times. Show the world how our strength in numbers, how many of us there are. When you don't have access to the democratic process, like the civil rights protesters, did not because of Jim Crow. That's when you have to show your majoritarian status by other means, but otherwise, it never really appealed to me.
Have you been to a protest?
I wrote about this a little bit, actually. I went to a demonstration shortly after October 7th. I was living in Washington, D.C., and there was kind of a pro-Israel rally where the politicians got up and said their nice things, and the people waved their American flags and their Israeli flags. And I was like, okay, I basically agree with you on the substance of all of this, but I still do not understand why we're doing this. I don't get it. It doesn't speak to me. And that's I think the only protest I've ever been to.
I think it's good that you went, in part because it's a counter protest, because there were protests in favor of Hamas. So you want to kind of show numbers that the whole country, you don't want to create the perception that the other view is a majoritarian view. I have been to many protests when I was a teenager because I lived in Venezuela, of course. So it's like no access to the democratic process. So we, of course, protested against the regime. So I absolutely agree. In the U.S., though, I think the closest I've been to protests is like prayers in front of abortion clinics. That's like my...
You get arrested for that?
No, it was in Indiana.
You do in the UK.
Thank God it was in Indiana and in Kentucky, but especially in Indiana. Mike Pence was governor, so, religious freedom, thank God.
When I was in college, a lot of my friends were protesting. It seemed like every other week there was a new cause. I mean, I remember one of my first days on campus at Baruch College here in the City University of New York, and a bunch of the, other Latino kids that I hung out with were protesting in the main quad, and the beef was that they were insisting that the administration change the word Hispanic throughout all of the official documents and the websites of the schools, and use the word Latino instead.
Oh,
And I just remember
This is
looking
that's so
around.
silly.
pre-Latinx.
Yeah, this is pre-Latinx. I don't think Latinx caught on even with that crowd.
People took time out of their day to
Yeah.
do that.
Well, this was exactly my reaction, which was like, I don't understand what you guys are upset about.
Right.
Life is really good. We're all in college. Many of you are going to kind of go on to graduate school and enter the economic elite in some form or fashion. What is it that, that you don't have, that you feel this sense of outrage for? And it
It's
was like,
virtue signaling. It's what
yeah,
Rob Henderson talks about. It is part of the expression, which is why we see it among young people very often. But what I think is different with the No Kings is what you mentioned. It's old people.
yeah,
So I do wonder what's the difference there, because for them, I doubt it is to gain social points.
Well, there are some elements of the No Kings, substantive elements of the No Kings protest that I think have uh, some evidentiary quality to them, which is that all of the materials that get passed out are like, we're patriotic, we're constitutional, wave your American flags. Even if you don't really believe in that stuff so
sure,
much, that's the image we're looking to project. And I think that that appeals to a kind of maybe older, whiter, more boomer
yeah,
type protester. Whereas the younger people who have been rabble rousing in various demonstrations on college campuses and city streets for the last few years, especially, they're not interested in that stuff
yeah.
at all, right? They're
Right.
they're outflanking the No Kings people by a good margin.
No, I think that's right. I mean, when I think about just, protest culture in general, I can never see myself in it. And the thing that I always picked up on was the incongruity between the rage of the people participating and the quality of their lives, right? I mean, like, life is good,
Right.
generally speaking. If you are living in the United States of America, even if you're poor,
You're
life
rich.
is good. Right? I mean, I just think about, like, the first time that I went with my family to the Dominican Republic and was actually exposed to real abject poverty and corruption, and it broke my heart. Even, my earliest memories of that country were, of tears, right, associated with just witnessing that level of abject poverty. Maybe that's why I kind of appreciated where I was able to live and grow up so much. But yeah, I mean, there's just such an incongruity, which I think is kind of at the root of why I always felt like an outsider
Mm.
in my social circles, right? I mean, like, born in New York City, raised in Brooklyn, I should, if a child of immigrant parents, right? Like, I should be a lefty. And
Well, no, that's the thing. The incongruity is the lefties who, being
sure,
the children of immigrants or being people who are
yeah.
doing well, protest against the country that getting that opportunity. You should be like the way you think should be the normal
It
way to
should be,
think.
but it wasn't. It wasn't
Right.
in my social circles, right? And it just gets me thinking, like, I mean, maybe there's something strange about me, all right? And maybe there's something strange about you guys, right? Because I feel like all of us have kind of ended up going down this path. I mean, here we are, working for the Manhattan Institute, writing about conservative ideas, in a city where we are very much in the minority, right? And so, for me, it was just, there were a couple of issues that really pushed me outside of that, kind of mainstream culture. But, Tal, I remember your freshman year at Princeton, not because we knew each other back then, but because you actually made news as an 18-year-old. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about, like, how you ended up on this track.
Yeah, well, the piece that you're alluding to was something I wrote for the conservative magazine at Princeton when I was a freshman.
What was the title again?
I didn't come up with the title, so
Yeah, we
let's
never did.
I don't
But did you like it?
did I like it? It worked. It had a
Okay.
Sure.
viral effect. Why I'll never apologize for my white male privilege.
Excellent.
When I did this, so the language of apology was actually in the body of the piece. Like, I actually did write about, like, I won't apologize. I meant it in, like, the
Sure.
the Socratic
Right,
sense
right.
of like,
Yes.
I don't need to explain why I have what I have. I don't owe anyone an explanation for like,
Heather McDonald got into your mind and possessed the writing.
I mean,
It's excellent.
she's on my. I was like reading Heather McDonald at the
Of
time.
course.
You know, I sometimes have to pinch myself that we get to I
Work
get to call
together. I
her
know, it's
colleague.
strange.
Yes.
But yeah, I wrote a piece about the notion of privilege, which we can get into how much the term has shifted in its meaning and its implications over the last decade plus. Um, but that was a buzzword at the time.
Yeah.
People talking about white privilege, male privilege, how you're born on third base if you have certain identity markers. And I said, look, what's beneath the surface here? I'm not a child of immigrants, but I am a grandchild of Holocaust survivors,
Yeah.
and my grandparents came here with absolutely nothing and worked and the same boring classic immigrant formula, get an education, work hard, follow the rules, try to be a good person, help others, and what goes around will come around. And sent my dad to college and business school, and he was able to move out to the suburbs and raise a family, and we've been on an upward trajectory ever since. And I think probably what distinguished me from my classmates who felt resentment towards this notion that like some people had gotten ahead, um, thanks in large part to people other than themselves,
Yeah.
thanks to the sacrifices of others, is that I view that as something to be grateful for.
Sure.
Right? Like, sure, I mean, life is certainly not perfectly fair, and there's a large measure of luck.
Yeah.
Um, Involved in making it here and anywhere. But I just look back at all those people who sacrificed for me and I say, thank you. I'm
Right.
so glad you put me first, even though you didn't know me.
Yeah.
I was barely a concept. I
How,
think a
how,
lot of,
how
yeah,
did how did those stories of your grandparents like did you get to talk to them a lot about the Holocaust and all that?
no, my grandfather died 13 years before I was born, and my grandmother died when I was 4.
Oh, I see.
So I really I've
Yeah.
no memories of my grandfather, very few of my grandmother. My grandmother did write her story down in a kind of prose that's striking in just how matter of fact it is
Right.
when she talks about her experience. No, but it was certainly transmitted through my parents and through the community
Right.
to which I belonged. Right, you
Right.
you would hear Holocaust survivors speak on Holocaust Remembrance Day, and sometimes you just find yourself at dinner with
Right.
my
Yeah.
friends' grandparents. And I just think about what a blessing it is
Right.
that I'm here in America. My life is so easy. We have it so good.
Right.
That's not to say it's perfect, of course. But fundamentally, when I wake up every morning, the first word out of my mouth is thank you.
Thank you. Right. Yeah.
Uh,
I
Right.
had a very similar experience, right? I mean, the sort of concept of white privilege was very pronounced when I was in college as well. And, I rejected it for, a couple of reasons. One of them was just I felt automatically like it was requiring me to admit some kind of inferiority, which I just could not abide by,
Mm.
right? Maybe I'm just way too full of myself, but the idea that I needed special assistance was just anathema to me. I could not, I could not get behind it. And so, from a very, very early age, I kind of found myself pushing back on the sort of dominant narratives about race. And, one of the issues where that narrative was most pronounced, more than, likely any other issue, was the issue of policing. And that was actually sort of the start of my path here. I actually
Right.
remember the moment was my first year sociology class.
Mm.
We had a guest speaker. We would have a guest speaker once a week. We had 2 sessions a week. And they would talk for half an hour, and then we would have a class discussion that, related the talk to the reading. And one of the guest speakers was a guy who had just gotten out of prison. And he came and he gave basically a diatribe against the NYPD and the criminal justice system and how it was racist. And at the time, when I was in high school, which was not long before I heard this talk, I'd hung out with a lot of kids who ended up going to jail, going to prison. Um, so that world was somewhat familiar to me. And I just remember looking around at my classmates, all of whom were captivated and nodding their heads, and you could see the anger forming on their face. And I just remember thinking, like, this guy's full of it, right? Like we all agree.
Did you ask him why he went to prison?
No, we didn't get to ask the speaker any questions.
It seems like the most important question is why he went to prison.
He did tell us for dealing crack, and most of his ire was aimed at the Rockefeller drug laws, which are the mandatory minimums here.
And how long did he spend in prison?
I think he said something like 18 years or something like that.
Was
a significant amount of time.
Was the message fundamentally like, this could easily be you? It's just like one small mistake, one slip.
To become a professional crack dealer.
Right,
Clearly, you just make that mistake.
It was a lot of crack. Like, you don't get 18 years for, a couple of rocks, right? I mean, so this guy was obviously involved in a significant operation. But no, the basic thing was like, well, opportunities were denied to me, and I was clearly smart, and had other doors been open, I could have gone down this road. And I just remember thinking, nonsense, right? Every criminal that I knew in my life had made a choice, a very conscious choice to do that. And that was kind of the start. But, the thing that really kind of set me off down this track was that at the time, I didn't have the vocabulary with which to push back on any of these ideas. I know it's strange for some of the people listening to this, but I was not a nerd most of my life. I was a dumb jock, did not study a lot. This was actually the issue that sent me down an intellectual rabbit hole. That was how I discovered the work of the Manhattan Institute and of Heather McDonald, and started subscribing to City Journal. And, that was kind of the path. I had some kind of conservative inklings before that, but not a ton. And, sometimes I read some of these news stories that are coming out and, just think about like, how would I have reacted back then? It's just a nice reminder that, for as long as I can remember, I've kind of been going against the grain and thankfully have been comfortable with it. But I was actually thinking of you, Daniel, because there was another news story from last week, which was the announcement of the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes.
Which went to, I want to make sure I get her name right, Maria Corina Machado, who is an activist in Venezuela pushing back on the regime there. And, you mentioned being part of protests, pushing back on the regime when you were a kid. And I'm just interested in your kind of
I met Maria
origin
Corina
story.
when I was 17 years old. Yeah, I
Tell
know
us
her.
about that.
Maria Corina is a great woman. The reason I was attracted to her ideas was that she was the only person, even within the opposition, who was openly very pro-free market and anti-socialist. And I was always, I was kind of like the opposite of kind of like what you were saying. I was a nerd. And,
Me too,
yeah, it's okay.
There's no shame.
Yeah,
No, no
I
shame.
did Model
I
United
wish
Nations.
I was a nerd. I screwed up.
No, you became a nerd eventually. That's fine.
Eventually, I found my way.
So I was reading Milton Friedman since I was 12. I was watching Ronald Reagan videos. I was this kid in Venezuela who thought, these people are going to starve to death because of socialism. So let's get the hell out. And I was right. and people did get the heck out. So I met Maria Corina. She was back then not as popular as she is now. In fact, the rest of the opposition really disliked her because she was the only one who was not a lefty. And now, obviously, she was redeemed and as being right because everybody else turned out to be corrupt and all these other things. And so she's doing a great work in Venezuela, and I really hope that the regime falls. I would encourage the audience to read my article that just got published today, by the way.
Oh, where is it?
On Acton, with Acton.
Oh, fantastic.
I think it's Liberty, Religion and Liberty. Which is specifically about this Nobel Prize. I call it the Nobel Prize goes against socialism. Like, when did you ever hear of a Nobel Peace Prize going to somebody who is opposed to a socialist regime?
Right.
It's usually like lefty, cosmopolitan lefties who like did some humanitarian work or nothing at all.
Right. No, I think that's interesting. In fact, actually, if I had to characterize your come up with a headline, it would be like the actual No Kings.
Well, did you see that the No Kings, the Democrats abroad renamed it No Tyrants?
I saw.
Because they didn't want to offend the monarchs.
Right?
In the real countries.
The right number of kings.
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right.
Some people can be king. Others cannot, essentially, what their argument is. But, I always thought about economics, and I was always pro-free market. And then I started thinking about social issues when I came to America. You guys both mentioned, like, the race issue and privilege being important for you. That was not important for me until I came to the U.S. And one of the first things they tried to make us do in student orientation was a walk of privilege.
Wait, when did you come to the U.S.?
2016. I was 17 years old. I finished high school in Venezuela.
Got it.
And so I was 17, and they're like, "Now, if you are a man, take a step ahead. If you're a woman, take
Look
a
at
step
these.
back." And
Yeah,
I'm
I've
like,
seen some of
"Wait,
these.
what is going on here?" And I refused to participate.
Good for you.
Um, and so that was my first exposition to those ideas, and I was already predisposed against it. I'm like, I already came to America. What are people talking about? People don't have less opportunities because of their race or their sex.
Right.
Yeah, people grow up with different opportunities. Some people are rich,
Sure.
some people are poor. That's the reality of life. Welcome to humanity, to Earth.
Right. Yeah, it reminds me of a great line that Thomas Sowell wrote, and I'm going to butcher it. But inequality is the rule, not the exception. Like, we tend to talk about inequality as if it's some, corruption of the, proper order. But the natural order actually is inequality, right? As he says, like, we're all born naked and poor. And through the use of our own faculties are able to build wealth and survive and join in community. And, we should be seeking to figure out and mimic the behaviors that create wealth as opposed to trying to redistribute the wealth that's already been created. That always resonated with me as a kid.
When I took flack for the writing that I put out in
Yeah, what was
college,
that response like?
it was
What
it was
year was this?
crazy. This was in 2014. This was the spring of
Okay, you're
2014.
getting into peak woke.
Yeah, I think this was
Yeah.
right at its initial height. I think
Right.
there was a
It
second
kept
peak
going
in
up. It kept
2020,
going up.
but
Yeah.
yeah, no, people were really not examining the stuff closely. There was just
Yeah.
a bit of a mob mentality sweeping campuses, and privilege, I think, it's kind of faded as a concept, with good reason.
Sure.
Um, but it was popular then, and people would say things like, "Oh, you're just lording the fact that your family made it over others, and like you're so blind to the ways in which you were assisted, and that stuff isn't available to others." And the way I looked at it was like our natural condition, right?
Right.
Forget Jewish history, and all of human history
Sure.
is to be like poor and downtrodden, and life is generally terrible. But like we crack the code.
Yeah.
It's this combination of the rule of law and capitalism and like good bourgeois behaviors. I'm not trying to lord anything over anyone. I want to share this
Sure.
gift with you.
That's right.
We did it, and you can do it too. I truly believe you can do it too. So there's some people who are fatalists who are like, Ralph, is Dominican. They'll just never have access to that. Right. That is not my approach.
Yep.
I think statistically this is borne out that Hispanics, other minority.
I mean, look at Miami. Miami is the most foreign-born
Look at
city in
Miami.
America. Majority foreign-born, mostly Cuban.
Incredibly
I mean, what do
wealthy.
you think Cuba would look like if it had the system of government of Florida? It would look like, honestly, like Miami.
Yeah.
There's really no different.
No, you said something just now that actually made me think about the No Kings protests and some of the coverage, which was that, a lot of the people who were pushing back on you back then clearly hadn't fully thought things through. And I don't know if you guys have been watching some of the like interview footage from people who have been on the ground at the No Kings protests over the weekend, just asking pretty basic questions about some of the concepts that people were protesting about.
one clip.
It was like one woman was asked about, her sign about Citizens United, about overturning Citizens United. She couldn't say a single thing about the Citizens United case. I mean, just folded, immediately. And it gave me a little sense of relief that like, actually a lot of this is just pure emotion. No one's really actually thought a lot of this stuff through.
Okay, you have to hear this one. This one is really funny. Nick Shirley, this like journalist, independent, a young kid, he introduced this couple. I think they were boyfriend and girlfriend. And they had a sign about immigrants. Immigrants built America. And then he goes and asks the guy in front of his girl, do you think illegal immigrants should be deported?
Oh, I saw that.
And then he says yes. And then she's like, what? And then he's like, I think I broke up a relationship. He like had no idea. He had a common answer like, yes, actually, if they cross the border illegally, we should return them. And she was outraged, like, no, nobody's illegal.
And she was white and he wasn't.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That
that's
was, it was like, that was the icing on the cake.
I think he was like South Asian, and then she was white.
This is the icing on the cake. Did not like, I was like, yeah, obviously. No. I mean, it does give me a little bit of a sense of relief, right? That like, actually there are a lot of people who claim to be activists and who pose as activists, but haven't actually thought a lot of it through. Now the sad part is that given the median age at the No Kings rally, clearly they're never going to get it. And that's just, one of the downsides of living in a society that's structured the way that ours is, but I still wouldn't change it for the world.
Right.
Um,
I'd be more concerned about, again, the dog that didn't bark at these rallies, the people who we know harbor similar
right.
tastes and attitudes, but were not there.
No, also, like, we didn't even notice there were mass protests. I didn't notice. I
Well, I
think
live
people.
out in Long Island now, so it was nice and quiet.
Well, I didn't notice, and I thought, people have a right, if they're not bothering others, let
Sure.
them do their thing. I mean, if they're happy saying no kings and whatever,
What
let
do we
them.
make of the seemingly concerted media effort to uh, make this seem like some kind of epochal event, right? Like
Yeah.
generational protest.
Well, this is the second time it's happened, right? I
Yeah.
mean, so I don't know, did the first one really change the world,
No, I
right?
don't think
And stop
so.
Trump from getting elected?
I think the best way to understand this is, voter mobilization, maybe donor
Yeah.
mobilization, just omni cause,
Well, it'll make for some
vehicle.
great
Yeah,
photos that they can repurpose in, campaign mailers and, social media content. But
I just,
outside of that, I don't really
I
see.
just don't know why anyone should care. This is not bringing to the forefront a political position or a package of political
Right.
positions that we didn't know existed before.
Well, and it's also it's the anti-Trump. It's like, instead of being for something, the only thing they have been able to do since Trump got nominated is
Sure.
stop Trump. So no kings. It's really about no Trump.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Well, what's also like strange to me is that one of the chief complaints is this idea that Trump has been sort of consolidating executive power when, the left actually, if you know anything about the history of the law, the left is actually very famous for doing exactly that. I mean, I'm just thinking about like the FDR court, which, absolutely expanded the authority of the executive through, everything from allowing more delegation, by Congress to the executive to, creating out of whole cloth these ideas of judicial deference to executive interpretations of statutes, overreading the Constitution to create all kinds of regulatory authority that gets exercised almost exclusively by the executive branch
But
now.
not Trump is able to use, right? So
But rather than abusing it, actually, I mean, his solicitor generals have pushed back on things like Chevron deference, for example, which, for the people
got
who don't know,
overturned.
right, this is a legal concept where the courts have traditionally deferred to executive agency interpretations of congressional statutes that grant them rulemaking authority, even when the court's job is to actually do the work of interpreting the statute, right? That's why the judicial branch exists. And yet this is something that's been defended by the left for years,
I'll say,
vehemently.
if something great could come out of the Trump presidency, is the left saying, actually, we need to limit presidential and executive authority.
You think they'll do that?
Well, I don't know if you saw Lisa Slotkin, the Michigan
Yeah.
senator. She's now coming out in favor of a constitutional amendment to limit pardon power to a number of people, or even eliminate it.
Right.
I think that's good. Joe Biden pardoned thousands of people.
Sure.
And mass pardons. It wasn't as it was
Right,
intended
right.
to be, which is, I know this specific person and I want to give clemency or pardon to this
Right.
specific person. It
Far
was
be it from the
everybody who committed this crime, you're pardoned. Right?
Or be it from the Manhattan Institute to oppose a policy that would keep more people incarcerated.
Of course, I want to keep that more people.
Yeah.
I mean, these are people who are guilty of their crimes, right? We're not talking about unjust
Yeah,
incarceration
in all
generally.
seriousness, I'm not sure that's the part of executive power that I would target first.
It's not, but I think it's an indication, and I think they should also go ahead and say, hey, we want to limit the presidential power in regulation, we want to limit the presidential power in all these things. Let's limit spending. Let's do a constitutional amendment.
I actually like the idea of the pardon. And
Unlimited pardon?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the main reason for that is that, it is not unlikely that there will be a regime one day that abuses its authority and, imprisons its political opponents, right? We already saw hints of that, with the lawfare engaged in against Donald Trump and his inner circle. I think the president should be able to sort of retain that power, right? Because to the extent that there's a popular political movement that pushes back on an abusive regime, we're basically adopting a rule that doesn't allow us to correct the harms done by that regime.
Well, at least not by the
fullest form.
president. It could be by Congress, but yeah.
Yeah, but Congress wouldn't be able to, retroactively pardon everyone.
They could, passing a law.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, that was the First Step Act, essentially.
Well, yeah, but the First Step Act kind of retroactively made people eligible for judicial review.
But I mean, they
They
could
still
just
had
pass a
to
law
affirm it.
releasing that.
Sure, yeah. I guess they'd have to do it by name, but I don't see that happening,
Yeah.
right?
Let's see when we get a bipartisan consensus on rolling back the substantive regulatory authority of the alphabet soup agencies.
So,
Yeah,
right.
I mean, the
Yeah,
RAIN
yeah,
Act,
yeah.
I like the RAIN Act.
The RAIN Act is great.
Yeah, to limit regulatory authority of important regulations. I mean, this is the kind of thing that could actually limit presidential authority.
Right. Well, people don't actually know this. When I first started at the Manhattan Institute, I came on as a legal policy person doing criminal justice reform work. Now, it was in the regulatory space, and my main issue was regulatory overcriminalization. And what people don't know is that we actually have no idea how many criminal laws exist in America. I try to tell people this, like they don't believe me. The ABA in the early 90s, actually, the American Bar Association, actually tried to count how many crimes are on the books in the United States. They spent like $1 million and spent a year on this project only to scrap it because they actually could not keep up with the number of new crimes being created. And then the worst part about it is that the vast majority of the new crimes being created are not voted on by Congress.
Of course.
This blows
or the states. Yeah.
Everyone has this sort of I'm just a bill, idea of how the federal government is supposed to work, right? I'm dating myself now. But like the reality is that the way most crimes are created is that Congress will pass a broad bill granting some regulatory agencies authority. And then there'll be like a regulatory catch-all provision where they say any violation of any rule promulgated pursuant to this act is going to be punishable as a misdemeanor or as a felony. And then the alphabet soup agency in question starts making rules, not realizing that every single rule that they make is technically a criminal offense if it's violated. And that should change, right? We shouldn't live in a country. You want to talk about no kings. How about we live in a country in which 98%, give or take, of the criminal law at the federal level, right? Like is not even voted on by Congress. That shouldn't be the case. We live in a country in which we don't even know how many criminal laws are on the books.
Like we want to put people in prison for murder, for theft, for rape, for all the actual crimes.
Catching the wrong kind of fish.
That's right.
Yeah. Exactly. Not for that.
Or it wasn't for catching the wrong kind of fish. It was for throwing it back.
That's true.
There's a Supreme Court case where it is based on a guy who was fishing and his boat was inspected by, was it the Coast Guard? Or one of these agencies that was looking at, the catch. And they suspected that some of the fish that he caught were undersized, which is illegal and he could get fined. So they made him go back to shore to weigh the fish and measure the fish. And so the allegation is that on the way back, he dumped some of the fish back into the ocean.
Oh.
And they charged him with a crime under, get this, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which was passed in the wake of the Enron scandal, to punish like the shredding of documentary evidence.
And
they claimed that he had to, first off, I don't think...
they should have fined him. Like that should not be something where people go to jail. But money,
I think that's fair. He was convicted of a felony.
Wow.
And so the Supreme Court eventually overturned his conviction on somewhat dubious grounds. Yeah. Well, I actually thought they got the textual analysis wrong because I would have decided the case on the word destroy. Like he didn't destroy the fish; he actually just put them back in their home.
That's clever. That's kind of clever way to say that.
I don't think that was. I understand.
He didn't destroy the fish, but he didn't destroy the evidence.
Well, he didn't destroy the evidence. The evidence exists as far as
he got rid of it. Yeah,
right. Which is slightly different. But yeah, I all that to say is that I'm not sure I ever really took these no kings folks seriously. They seem to have quite a high degree of tolerance.
The things I don't like about kings is the arbitrary authoritarian authority and the lack of accountability to the people.
Yeah.
Regulators and bureaucrats in the federal government
check
all of
both of those in very large proportions.
Also, wait a minute. I do like some kings. What do you mean? Like there are some countries for which, not the United States,
sure,
but there are some countries in which the monarchies work.
Yeah.
And it's actually better for democracy. People forget Spain, Thailand, those wouldn't be democratic countries today if they weren't monarchies.
Interesting.
Like the king saved the monarchy. The democracy in Spain. after Franco. In Thailand, I mean, how do you think they remained democratic and all that? It was because of the influence of the monarchy. So, I mean, it's a bad name in general.
Well, we're
but
still not going to have any kings
and
here
also,
outside of the three gentlemen at this table.
on the authoritarianism part.
3 short kings.
That's right. That's right. 5 aces and 12.
Yeah, exactly. This is like an anti-short king protest. But no, the authoritarian parties also came from the left during the pandemic. People forget what the U.S. government, the state governments did to us during 2020, during 2021.
Own a business, shut it down, right? No due process. Want to go outside? Nope, no due process. Want to be with your family? Nope, be subject to arrest. I mean, there was this the very famous photo of a man coming in from surfing by himself in the ocean, and there are like 3 police officers waiting to arrest him. It's like,
wow.
Where were all the No Kings protesters then, right? I mean, these were the ideas that were kind of in my head when I was coming up. It was like, I cannot take you all seriously because you don't actually have any real principles here. And I, like, I think ultimately that's probably the most.
By the way, these are the same people who would support doing in America what they're doing in the UK with social media.
Yeah.
Where if you post something that they consider racist
exactly
in Facebook,
literally
the police is going to know.
Yeah. And arrest you.
We are going to arrest you for a hate crime.
Yeah. I watched a video of police in the UK arresting a woman because they alleged that she was praying silently near an abortion clinic. She was just standing there.
She admitted it. I think it was good.
But admitted that she was praying silently.
Yes,
in her
exactly.
It's like, not only will we criminalize speech,
I would have gone to prison for that one.
But we will criminalize thought, literally, which is crazy. So all that to say is, like, if you guys are out there at the No Kings protest, please, like, have at it, do your little march, whatever, but be consistent, right? Like, take the time to actually investigate the degree to which your government oversteps its bounds, understands that it happens on your side too, and maybe do something about it.
I respect consistency.
Maybe then they'll, it'll land better. So, all right, well, thank you 2 Kings for joining me for this great discussion. For those of you out there who are watching, please do like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the things. Thanks again to our panelists. Thank you to our producer, Isabella Rajai. And until next time, you have been watching the City Journal podcast.